Hello, hello. Happy February. February just feels different, right? I think so. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but February feels a little different from January. Definitely feels like things are lightening up, I guess, with the sun out a lot more, snow doing what it needed to have done, and sort of leaving us all stuck and trapped in our own ways. But there's somebody right now that's out there trying to get the snow together, trying to break up the snow. I get it. I've been out there myself and it is not easy, but happy February. So, welcome to tonight, this evening's topic. Can relationships survive separation? I don't know. It's just been on my mind. Just something to think about and something y'all have probably thought about or been through. And I guess it depends on why you separated, right? So it depends if it's like infidelities or if it's lack of compatibility. Maybe you're just in different places in your life and you need to take a break to see what it is you really want. So there could be different reasons that people separate. For the most part, it's a mature decision to make for sure. A separation to me is a breakup. Essentially a separation is a breakup. And I don't like to admit that, but that's definitely what it is. It's saying, we need to go our separate ways for whatever the reason is. And that is better than being together at this time. That's what it feels like. So what are y'all's thoughts on separations? Are they breakups? Are they pre-breakups? Are they better than breakups? Do they what is it about separations that make them a little bit distinct, possibly from breakups, right? What is it about separations that can make them feel different? I would say that separations can make you feel a little bit more hope. I think breakups, I think they're the same thing, but with with different intentions. I think that a separation is the intention of possibly surviving the separation, right? And finding a way back to one another. Whereas a breakup is, no, this is a clean break. We're going to try to do this separately. We're going to go our separate ways for real, for real. And you know, that's it. My intentions are to be free of the relationship. So that's the distinction for me, I guess. You can let me know what your distinctions are between separations and breakups, but there's no real difference. I feel like it's time apart from somebody that you've grown very accustomed to. It's a lack of the things you were getting within the relationship. And so it's essentially a breakup, a separation. But yeah, I feel like it just depends on what the reason is. I think that there are plenty of times where we can point to separations in our lives or breakups in our lives. And maybe that led to getting back together at some point with the person or rekindling some flame with somebody. But I think for the most part, the intention of a breakup is I'm going to do this without you. I am going to find my way out of this relationship and what I've grown used to in this relationship and move on. And a separation is kind of like breakup light. It's like I don't really have the heart right now to fully separate. I mean, to fully break things off. So let's separate. I think it's kind of like a cop out in a way. It's a little bit of a easy way out of a situation where you may just end up broken up anyway, right? It can feel like that for sure. But I do think there are times where separations are literally breaks. It's a time where, especially if you're growing apart or you're starting to feel like you're going different directions anyway. Like a separation can be, let's figure this out individually before we plunge into something that feels permanent, right? That feels more serious or more time consuming. Let's see if we need this time apart before we make these really major decisions in our relationship. So I think there are times when separations can definitely feel like intentions wise, they are meant to reevaluate something about the relationship or something about yourself. Even it's not even always about the other person or the relationship. It's about reevaluating something about yourself, where it's like, is this what I want? Right. And so I feel like we have personal experiences with separations versus breakups, or there may be those of you that are looking at them as like the same thing, like I sometimes tend to do. I think that they're both traumatizing in their own ways, for sure. I feel like a separation can be a little more thought through than a breakup. Typically, when you're separating, there's some type of thought process about consideration and, like I said, intentions. This isn't to hurt, right? Not that it's not going to hurt, but this isn't to hurt myself or the other person. It's merely to just reflect or reevaluate something. And a breakup can be, this is going to hurt, right? I gotta let go. I gotta move on. And with the intention of not rekindling things, with the intention of severing ties more permanently than a separation. So I think most separations lead to breakups. That's just my honest opinion. I think that most separations lead to different lives and people realizing things about themselves that they may not realize while they're in the midst of the relationship, and finding better for the most part. That won't be everybody's story or situation, but for the most part, when you move on and you separate, you can find better. There are those situations, and I have like some celebrity stories that I like, where they got back together after separations, and everybody sort of like going to their corners and really figuring things out and going, okay, I'm ready now. That's another reason for a separation. Somebody's not ready. So in that case, I feel like you could definitely get back together with a person. You can definitely survive the separation when somebody's not ready, when the other person is not wanting to wait. I think that's fair. Somebody not being ready and the other person not wanting to wait. I think that's a fair reason to celebrate. I mean, to celebrate. It could be a reason to celebrate, but it's a reason to separate, right? I think that if you find yourself celebrating that somebody isn't ready and the other person is not waiting, that's a sign of self-love right there. That's a sign of, I'm not trying to put any of my dreams and goals on hold for someone. I think also context is important. It's not always about putting something on hold. Sometimes it is about there being enough love in a person or enough love in a relationship where you're like, we can survive this. You focus on what you need to focus on outside of our relationship. I'll focus on what I need to focus on. And what we're focusing on jointly will bring us back together. Like I said, there are plenty of stories. We've experienced this in our own lives, right? Where you separate from someone and you get back together. And I'm not really referring to those instances where it's like make up to break up all the time, constantly. That's more a sign of something unhealthy, right? And something a little toxic, as opposed to, like I said, separations can be very thoughtful. I think when you get to the unhealthy, the toxic stuff is when you are breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. That can be context wise something that's a little bit toxic because you haven't given yourself that time to know whether this can work or not, or you just keep throwing yourself back into the same situation without any changes. So that's where I feel like a separation can be different from a breakup, where, like I said, they can be a little bit more thoughtful and really just considering yourself and the other person. I think that when you can take the time and the consideration to say, I need to be by myself, or it would be better if we figure things out separately. It's way better than stringing someone along. It's way better than giving somebody hope that you can't really promise, right? You can't really promise them things. And I think when you're making promises, it can definitely feel a bit unfair. So I just have to feel like separations can be the same as breakups for sure, because you're separating yourself from somebody that you have been in a relationship with and somebody that feels very close and very familiar to you. It can also hurt the same as a breakup. There can be some slight differences in the pain level and the trauma level of it. Sometimes people separate knowing they're going to get back together with a person, or separate with the intentions of getting back together with a person. Like, yeah, you go do you, I'm going to do me. And when the time is right, you know, that's another important distinction, when the time is right. Because sometimes you can be with somebody and the timing is off. And that's typically because somebody's not where they want to be in their own individual life, and they have more they want to accomplish individually, and it's starting to interfere with the relationship. And so in order for it to not interfere with the relationship, that person makes a decision to make it fair. I feel make it fair. Again, back to you focus on you, I'll focus on me, and we'll come back together and make this right when the time is right. I think that's better than a breakup.